Chapter 25. Terror at the Tor. 7th dark day of Cantle, 819. 23 days until Sown. The Koratani form up with a wall of shields planted into the ground. The second row of men set their shields on top of the first. No one has ever seen one of the clans try this strategy before. Usually, they let out blood-curdling screams and sprint at the enemy. I scan the hills for the Black Lord. This has to be his doing. The second row of shields drop, and a volley of arrows flood the sky. Eosia steps in front of us and swats arrows out of the sky with inhuman precision. Ysela and Arthmael flank him to either side. If I advance, I'll get brained by one of their staves. A guttural roar is loosed from below, and the warriors abandon their newly constructed wall. The charge is upon us. Eosia, move! I change into an auroch and dig my hooves into the rocky soil, exploding down the slope. Eosia dives out of my way, his foot glancing off my shoulder as I pass. The pounding of my hooves drowns out the warriors' battle cries. I lower my head and charge into the center of their line. The first two men go flying backward over their comrades. Two more are gored, one on each horn. I shake my head to dislodge them. The men in back run for the protection of their shield wall. The men on either side are sliding down the hill feet first into the marsh. How I wish aurochs could smile. I lower my head and run through the shield wall, crushing men and shields alike. There is nothing but the downward slope into the muck before me. I change my direction and race up the hill at the remaining men. The few stragglers break before me, too scared to take a kill shot. I proudly prance up the empty battlefield to my fellow druids and transform back to myself. Ysela and Arthmael are shouting their encouragement. "A little more warning next time," says a grinning Eosia, gently massaging his foot. "There was no room to join you on the slope, and I wasn't about to simply watch from behind. Your charges are amazing, but they are unlikely to keep working." "I know. What do you think they'll do next?" "They'll want to take the Tor by nightfall," Eosia says, clucking his tongue. "They won't want to risk us somehow slipping past them. My guess is that they'll either go for a more sustained advance, with archers at the ready to shoot your next animal iteration, or they'll split their forces up and make us defend both paths up the Tor." "How is it you know so much about tactics?" Arthmael asks. "I am the eldest son of Armel, clan chief of the Artificers. I was well trained in warfare." "No wonder you won the Gueri last year," Arthmael says. "I've been practicing since I was 4, he smiles. "They're forming up again," Ysela says. Just as Eosia has suggested, the shields in front protect the archers in back. A quarter of the men break off and start marching along the eastern side toward the rear path. "You were right on both counts," I say. The archers below us start to loose volleys at us. "I guess they're not going to let us stand around and strategize," Eosia says, as he breaks another arrow in two. "Arthmael and Grami, tell Catel and Sifra that we will be attacked on both fronts. Then you two," he points to Arthmael and me, "man the northern side. We'll hold the south." "How did they come by so many arrows?" Ysela complains. "The lake people shoot fish with their bows," Arthmael says. "And being on 3 small islands surrounded by a marsh, it would have been the best defense," Eosia adds. "I can help with the archers." I point back over my head at the fat rain clouds to the south. "They're coming our way, but I can nudge them along a bit." Eosia nods approvingly. "For the first time, I think we may survive this day. Tell Catel and Sifra to focus on the archers. Let's take out as many as we can before they get to the path." Ysela sees the rain clouds too. "No, it's only been a few days since the equinox. You'll kill yourself." "Is it any better if Girthsid kills me instead?" Arthmael and I reach a flat area where we'll make our stand. Catel and Sifra both are frantically launching missiles at Yzella's side of the tor. They must be hard-pressed, Arthmael says. And if we run to aid them, these warriors will be on Catel and Sifra in no time. Arthmael grunts. I hate standing around being useless. Well, I'm going to need you to guard me, while I pull those rain clouds over us. Great, more standing. I channel my will to the sky and pull the clouds forward, but there is nothing for me to grab. The clouds are too nebulous. Still, I can't give up. My shoulders start to go numb, and my hands begin to tremble. Nothing happens. I refocus my will, straining with all my might to make some sort of difference. A solid force hits me in the ribs, knocking me back. I scan the area for enemies, but only Arthmael is near me. You became unresponsive, so I had to break you out of your trance. I have to pull the rain over to us. You were about to pass out. I'm close. I know it. I lie. You're no good if you're unconscious. An arrow whizzes past his ear. He gives me a look, as if it's my fault. Brandishing our staves, we block the path and begin to knock down or dodge arrows from the 15 men below. A stalemate develops, as they seem content to keep up a steady stream of arrows and not advance. Not one stone has been slung at our attackers. I check on Sifra and Catel. They are still launching stones at a frenetic pace in support of Eosia and Yzella. These warriors are a diversion to pin us down. Yzella and Eosia must be facing the main force. At last, the rain arrives on its own accord. Arthmael lets out a shout. You did it, Grami! I'm such a fraud. It doesn't take long before the bowstrings are waterlogged. First, their accuracy leaves them. Now the distance is only half what it was. Girthsid's woman is leading this group, and she calls a halt to the arrows. We made it through the first round unscathed, Arthmael says, not even breathing hard. I'm trying not to shake in the cold rain. I feel weak as a newborn. I lean on my staff for support. The warriors below us start beating on their shields and shouting in unison. The charge will come any moment, Arthmael says. The front shields drop, and the all-out charge begins. Screaming with vengeance, the warriors expose their woad-coloured torsos in the mad dash up the hill. What good are our staves going to do us against a shield and spear? I blank for a moment and realise that I am charging down the hill at the screaming Koratani. My claws are digging into the dirt, giving me good traction despite the wet grass. I slam full speed into the centre of the shield wall, and the men go flying backward. On either side, men race past me, then falter. They did not plan on having an angry cave bear in their midst. I turn and charge the men on my left. All but one managed to dive head first down the slope of the tor. He remains frozen in place. I swat him with my right paw, and his head follows his comrades to the marsh below. A stabbing pain in my right side alerts me that not everyone is paralysed in fear. I spin and see 5 men holding spears at the ready. I circle them, giving them the high ground. Before they can rouse their courage, Arthmael strikes from behind and fells 2 of them. That's all the opening I need. I charge at the nearest man and make quick work of him. An arrow strikes me in the hip, and I turn to face my new attacker. Girthsid's woman pulls another arrow from her quiver. It's hard to miss from 5 paces away. I try to change back to human form, but the iron-tipped arrow keeps me from anamorphing. Arthmael jumps in front of me and parries the next arrow. Reaching behind, he pulls the arrow out of my hide. The change back to human form is still a challenge. No time to wonder why. I grope for a weapon and cut myself on a spearhead. With a stomp, I snap off the metal point and spin my new staff. It has a good weight. The remaining men on the path form a defensive position as they try to protect their wounded. Do we charge? I ask. Arthmael smiles back at me. That's the spirit. But no, 2 charging a crowd is not the best move. We give ground until we're back to our spot. The warriors regroup as the cold rain continues. I can't stop myself from shivering. The marsh-bound attackers wind their way back to their comrades, but none too quickly. There are still 11 warriors from the original 15. Many are sporting injuries. Arthmael is protecting his left shoulder. I inspect the wound. Without a word, I grab my sling and tie it around the wound. You'll have less mobility, but you won't bleed to death, I say in a cheerful tone. He laughs. It's good to know that this wound won't be the fatal blow. It's close to sunset, I say. How much longer do you think we have to keep this up? As long as we must, Arthmael says. Remember, Girthsid had 60 men when we met him going south. Only 15 have come to our side. That would explain why we've not received support from Catel and Sifra. I assumed that it was because they don't like you. Arthmael tries to keep a straight face, but can't. I told Lord Simbel that I possess the unique talent of making people dislike me upon first meeting me. I don't think they like you either, he says, pointing to the men below. Their spear tips are in front of their shields this time, their leader calling out the steps in a slow cadence. Another animal charge doesn't look promising this time, Arthmael says. I doubt I have the energy left to do so. This would be the time for an all-out charge. Well, then, let's thank the gods that we find ourselves on this tour in this bitterly cold wind, facing a group of blood-crazed, non-charging Koritani. At least the rain has stopped, I say. Arthmael lets loose an infectious laugh. Smiling, we face our attackers. They continue their relentless advance. As the wait stretches out, I'm given time to think about how the 2 of us will be able to fight a dozen of them. My vision starts to tunnel. Arthmael hits me on the shoulder. You need to stay in the here and now. He gives me a nervous glance. Wield your staff near the base. We have to keep a good distance between them and us, or we'll be overwhelmed. I nod. My staff is too heavy for my trembling arms to hold upright. I let the tip rest on the ground for now. When they close to 15 paces, Arthmael lowers his staff into a combat position. Remember, you want to sweep side to side. We can't let anyone get around us. Right. I raise my staff upright and sway it back and forth. If I leave it still, everyone will see how bad the tremors in my arms are. They are close enough now that I can hear their ragged breath. Mentally, I take note of the injured men. Why do they wait? I ask. Probably to unnerve us into making the first move. We glance sideways at each other. I thought it was because their stinking breath is being blown back in their faces, I call loudly. No, Arthmael says. They're wanting the woman to lead the charge. 2 men scream as they advance toward us, quickly closing the distance. Arthmael takes a step forward as he swings in a wide arc. The crack of the man's neck tells everyone that he's been silenced permanently. The second man is charging me. I also take my swing, but he manages to duck under it. I continue my momentum, so I'm not an easy target for his response. Arthmael steps between us and cracks several of the man's ribs. The man falls to one knee. Stay down, Arthmael yells. The man starts to rise. Arthmael pokes the man in the newly broken ribs with the butt of his staff. He falls over backward. The rest of the warriors scream in unison and charge us. The downed man is lost in the crush of his comrades. I sweep my staff in wide arcs, varying the height. The men stop just outside the arc and point their spears at me. Grami, we are going to have to give ground, but do so grudgingly, Arthmael calls. Catel gives off a celebratory cry, but I'm too pressed to see what has happened. I guard the edge of the slope so that no one can go around me. Several of them move toward the center of the path, and then peel off to attack Arthmael. Only 3 remain engaged with me. They have driven a wedge between us. I manage to make contact with one of them. His head is at an unnatural angle as he slides down to become food for the fish. I lunge at the other 2 before spinning and taking out the knees of an attacker between us. He's quickly finished off with a parry from Arthmael. We give a little ground so that we can reunite. Arthmael takes another wide swing, separating the attackers from us. We can't get separated again, he manages through ragged breath. The ground begins to rumble and buckle, causing the warriors to lose their footing. Between us, the earth elemental rises from the hillside. Towering above everyone, it stomps the man closest to it. Girthsid's woman screams for her men to retreat. Tightly huddled, they know fear. Any moment and they will break. Grim-faced, their bodies go rigid. One by one, the rest of the warriors stiffen. They form up in a line, spear tips down, and advance. The Dark Lord has taken control of these men, Arthmael says. This has to be the last encounter, I say. It won't last much longer. Spears are largely ineffective against the walking mass of dirt. They switch to axes and immediately start taking chunks off the elemental. Get back, Catel yells from above. We retreat up the hill a dozen paces. At best, this will give us time to catch our breath, but already the warriors are dodging and weaving between the mound of dirt's slow punches. Stand, Catel cries as a rock hits the elemental's back. A creaking noise emanates from the strike point, and streaks of grey travel outward until the elemental is remade into stone. It falls forward and crushes 2 warriors. This is our chance. We charge from either side of the newly made boulder and make quick work of the remaining 4 warriors. Atop the hill stand the other 4 druids, gesturing wildly for us to hurry. We shamble up to join them. I told you we should have charged, I say, between gasps of breath. Arthmael breaks into a broad grin. I'll fight at your side any day. He breaks into a trot, and I follow, struggling to remain on his heels. This is our chance for escape, Ysela says. Head for the Gwanwins of Sulis, Eosia says. It's the natural place for Sifra to go. It's close, and Egan is sympathetic to our cause. Ysela wants to argue, but thinks better of it. We all face Sifra. His ears redden, and he gazes at his feet. Leave me behind. I'll find my own way out. Give me a moment with him, I say. The others survey Eosia and Ysela's steep-sloped battlefield. Where did the ice come from? Arthmael asks. Sifra was able to make an ice rune during the battle, Catel says triumphantly. Sifra, remember the puffins? Yeah, he says miserably. Being a druid, you probably know those birds better than anyone else on this entire island. What good does that do? Remember what I said. You have to understand the animal in order to take its shape. Focus your mind on a puffin and slowly visualize yourself contained within that body. He shuts his eyes tight. I can feel myself becoming immaterial. His eyes bolt open, scared of what is happening. That's good, I say to soothe him. Keep doing what you're doing, and you'll take the puffin's shape. What if I can't turn back? When you change, your mind is overlaid on top of a puffin's mind. As long as you don't keep the form too long, you'll be able to visualize yourself and change back. The ice is melting, Ysela says. Don't rush him, Catel says protectively. You can do this, can't you? I say as more of a command than a question. I think so, Sifra says. Everyone, let's get ready to go, I shout. Ysela and Arthmael take the form of red kites, of course. Eosia takes on the shape of a merlin. Catel chooses a bat and starts her metallic chirping at once. You can do it, Sifra. He squinches up his eyes, and his constipated look returns. About a dozen warriors are below us, shields raised as they gingerly test the recently frozen ground before each step forward. Sifra's form starts to waver and become insubstantial. He's right on the cusp. I hold my breath. Girthsid and his men are gaining more confidence. It won't be long before they break into an all-out sprint. Finally, the puffin form becomes solid, and Sifra lets out a grunting call that I interpret as a successful shout. I take a breath to center myself. I choose my favorite form, the tawny owl, but I have trouble anamorphing. I calm myself and focus my sluggish mind. Finally, I'm able to transform. We all launch ourselves into the air, everyone but Sifra, that is. He begins running away in the puffin's awkward gait and flapping his wings in circles. He lets out a growling sound of alarm, so I return to the tor. Changing back into myself, I lift Sifra up. The body of the puffin is spot on, but the eyes, they're still Sifra's brown eyes. Change back to human form, I say slowly, as I set him down. He reluctantly changes back to human form. How am I supposed to fly? He blurts out. We can hear Girthsid extorting his men to keep up the pace. When you were a puffin, you were holding on to your humanness too firmly. Release yourself into the puffin's body. It will naturally know how to fly. The voices are getting closer. Sifra can't help but repeatedly check for the Koratani. Block them out. If we die, it won't be because we stood frozen like a couple of deer waiting for the killing blow. Dead is still dead. Yes, but it is the final statement you make about this life. Do you want to end it cowering in fear, or giving your all to survive? Right, he says. But first, he pulls out a smooth stone. Shield your eyes. He hurls it toward the top of the tor. Sigil! A brilliant light blooms, too bright to merely close my eyes. I'm forced to look away. Shouts of confusion and pain come from our besiegers. I blink several times in an attempt to remove the white spots in my eyes. Now, focus on the puffin and start the changeover. He manages to change into a puffin quicker this time. After several awkward steps, his wings start acting like wings should. He takes off to the west and circles around to the south, directly over top the heads of Girthsid's men. An arrow pierces his left wing. Sifra lets out another alarm growl and flies back to me. His landing is a disaster, as he ends up touching down with his beak first. I search around for a weapon. I have to give him time to take off again. All that I can find is one of the slings. I dig around urgently for a handful of rocks. It's all I'll need. I'll either escape or be killed by the time I use all of them. I hear a puffin's grunting call behind me. Sifra is wobbling down the slope as fast as his tiny puffin legs can take him. I turn back to see Girthsid and his remaining men cresting the tor. Eosia's Merlin flies into Girthsid's face, searching for eyes with his razor-sharp talons. Girthsid manages to dodge, avoiding the attack at the very last instant. Eosia swoops around the warriors, flies past me, and grabs Sifra's clumsy form. He tries to rise, but his Merlin is too small for the task. A spear whizzes past my ear and skewers Eosia through the chest. Both birds crash into the ground. The Koratani raise a cheer. I snake my way to my friends. There is nothing I can do for the dead avian form of Eosia. Sifra is crumpled into a ball and is shaking uncontrollably. Choosing an eagle owl's shape, I grab him and launch us into the air. A red kite has returned and is harrying the attackers. I silently fly off into the darkness. Before I'm clear of the tor, I hear an injured screech from the kite. I adjust my flight over the marsh so I can see the tor. The red kite is losing altitude and headed for the islands of the lake village. I can't carry two birds at once, I let the avian brain take over, and I flee north to safety.